When he approached, I felt the air abandon my lungs. His eyes, the color of hot iron, bound me like invisible chains. The entire hall seemed to have fallen silent as the world spun around us. "You," he said, and in that single word lay a universe of secrets. My hands trembled, knocking over the goblet. The wine spilled across the marble like blood, a premonition of what was to come. And in that moment, I knew my destiny was sealed in the hands of a cursed king. Before we dive into this story, leave your comment with a rating from 1 to 10 and tell us what city you're joining us from. May this moment bring reflection and emotion to your heart. I found him in the moss-covered ruins, where the wind whispered ancient oaths and moonlight filtered through the cracks in the collapsed ceiling. They said no one should enter there after dusk, that the stones held voices and that the air grew too heavy for a human body to bear. But I had already learned to breathe the weight of things, the weight of gazes, the weight of the shame of being who I was. And perhaps that was why I didn't fear what slept chained in the center of that forgotten hall. He lay fallen among the shadows, his body covered in wounds that seemed to burn under the reddish glow of the moon. Thick chains wrapped around his wrists and ankles like iron serpents forged by some divine sentence. Blood seeped slowly, and yet there was an impossible presence about him, as if the very air bowed around his breath. I called him Wounded Wolf, before realizing the error hidden in that innocence. That night, I was merely the bastard daughter of the maid, a shadow among nobles, a servant who carried trays and silenced insults. They sent me to the ruins because they believed I feared ghosts. They wanted to laugh at my cowardice, but what I found was not a spectre, it was a man. A man whose eyes, even half open and feverish, had the color of hot iron and the power to reduce any resistance to ashes. When he tried to raise his head, I heard the dry clink of the chains and, without knowing why, felt the urge to free him. My hands trembled as I touched the metal. The cold cut my fingers, and the smell of rust mixed with the damp earth. The sound of the last link breaking echoed like a blasphemy, and for an instant the world seemed to hold its breath. He rose slowly, as if gravity itself feared him. His broad shoulders cast a shadow over me, and I was sure I had desecrated something sacred and terrible. Still, he didn't attack me. He just looked at me, and in that gaze was recognition, as if I were the mirror of something forgotten. The next morning, the entire village murmured about the omen of the red moon. Animals disappeared, the wind had changed direction, and the elders said that old King Alpha had awakened from his curse. I pretended to ignore the stories, but his name began to haunt me in the cold corridors of the castle. Wherever I was, I felt the echo of his presence, as if the ground pulsed beneath my feet. He appeared again on the night of the banquet, when I was called to serve wine to the guests. The ladies spoke of him with fear disguised as fascination. They said he had returned to reclaim the throne, that his voice could bend soldiers, and that no one dared to face him. I saw him before the herald announced his name. He stood at the door, cloaked in black, and when our eyes met, the entire hall seemed to pale. I recognized the wound on his temple, the hardened trace of pain, and I knew it was him, the wolf I had freed. When his gaze trapped me, the air vanished from my lungs. He walked among the nobles with the slowness of a predator measuring its territory, and each step silenced voices. He stopped before me, the goblet still in my trembling hand, and simply said, "You." The deep sound of his voice cut the silence like contained thunder. Everyone looked. The laughter ceased. The ladies exchanged glances, and I, my face burning, wished I could disappear into the shadow of my dress. He took the goblet, but his fingers brushed mine with deliberate precision. It was a brief touch, but I felt the world spin. The following hours were a whirlwind of glances and whispers. Countess Rowena, always attentive to any scandal, murmured about the maid the king seems to know. My stepmother, mistress of the house and my cruelest jailer, gave me an icy stare that promised punishment, and he, the newly crowned Alpha, didn't avert his gaze from me. He conversed with advisors, toasted with generals, but his attention orbited where I stood, as if an invisible thread pulled him toward me against his own will. Days later, I was summoned to the upper chambers. The walls exuded the scent of cedar and power. He stood by the window watching the waning moon. When he saw me, he turned with that calm that precedes storms. "Did you know what you were doing?" he asked. I shook my head, unable to lie. He approached, and each step seemed like a verdict. "You freed a cursed king. You freed what the world tried to forget." The last word came out almost as a lament. I wanted to answer, but he raised his hand and silenced me with his gaze. "And yet," he said, "I cannot decide whether to punish you or protect you." The next morning, the entire court was buzzing about the scandal. The king had requested that I remain in the castle under his direct protection. They said I had bewitched him, that the bastard had brought chaos to the royal order. The ladies of the court watched me as if I were a disease. The servants avoided me. I walked through the corridors as one carrying an invisible crown of thorns. He, in turn, seemed increasingly torn between reason and something deeper, something that made him follow me with his gaze, even when he feigned indifference. The climax came during the ceremony, under the full moon, the same one that had once bled over the ruins. I stood among the servants, head bowed, when the chief advisor announced the name of the new royal consort. The hall rose in anticipation. Everyone expected the name of a duchess, but the name that echoed strong and clear was mine. The shock was so great that I heard the sound of goblets crashing, fabrics tearing, murmurs turning into shouts. My stepmother fainted, and he, motionless before everyone, kept his gaze on me, firm, impenetrable, as if telling the world that nothing could undo what was already written. I didn't move. I simply felt the weight of destiny fall upon my fragile shoulders. I had freed a wolf, and he, in return, had freed something in me that not even the chains of shame could contain anymore. The hall divided between fear and reverence. The moon, a red witness overhead, seemed to smile, and as the nobles shouted, I finally understood. Sometimes, what they call a curse is merely the price of freedom. And the price of freedom for me would always be his gaze. The days that followed the announcement were like a feverish dream, where reality and nightmare blurred with each breath. From servant to future queen, the transformation was so abrupt that my body seemed not to recognize the new skin that clothed me. The maids who had once ignored me now bowed with a mixture of fear and envy. I felt their gazes like needles in my back as they bathed me in perfumed waters with oils that cost more than a month of my old wages. "Don't blame them," he told me on the third night, when he entered my new chambers without warning. The candlelight flickered with his presence, as if even the fire felt the weight of his power. Fear has always been the most valuable currency in this kingdom. I raised my eyes to him, feeling my heart pound against my ribs like a caged bird. The distance between us was only a few steps, but it seemed to hold an entire abyss. His face, sculpted in severe angles, held a beauty almost painful to behold, like looking directly at the sun. The scar that cut across his left eyebrow pulsed slightly, as if remembering some ancient violence. Why me? The question escaped my lips before I could contain it. Of all the women in the kingdom, why choose the bastard no one wants to look in the eye? He approached with that calculated slowness that made each second stretch like melting wax. His steps made no sound, as if the very wood of the floor feared to awaken his wrath. When he was close enough for me to feel the heat of his body, he stopped. "Because you were the only one who dared to touch me when I was a monster," he replied, his voice low like the growl of a predator. The only one who saw not chains but possibilities. His hands, marked by ancient scars, rose to my face, but stopped millimeters from touching my skin, as if something held him back. I saw the effort in his eyes, the silent battle he waged against himself. There was something primitive and ancient about him, something that fought to break free and that, at the same time, he struggled to keep chained. "There is a curse in my blood," he confessed, letting his hand fall. "A thirst that cannot be quenched, a fire that cannot be extinguished. The throne I reclaimed has a price, and that price is myself, fragmented between man and beast." That night, he said nothing more. He left as he had come, silent and laden with shadows. But his words hung in the air, like the perfume that lingers even after the flower is removed from the room. And as I looked out the window at the moon that was beginning to wane again, I felt that something within me was also transforming, breaking old bonds. Lessons began the next day. Etiquette, history, politics, music. Every minute of my days was filled with knowledge that, according to the severe Lady Evelyn, I should have acquired from birth. Her eyes, cold as river stones in winter, evaluated my every gesture, every word. "No, no, no," she exclaimed, tapping her stick on the table when I erred the order of the silverware or the pronunciation of some noble title. "A queen must be immaculate in her manners. You carry the weight of 1,000 gazes now." The weight I already knew, but it was different. Before, it was the weight of scorn, of oblivion. Now it was the weight of expectation, of constant scrutiny. Hands that had never touched anything but rough cloths and heavy buckets now had to delicately handle musical instruments and writing quills. Skin cracked by hard labor received nightly ointments, and the hair I had always hidden under simple caps was now braided into elaborate updos that made my scalp ache. But the worst were the audiences. 3 times a week, I was placed beside him in the throne room, like an exotic trophy everyone could observe, but no one dared to touch. Nobles from distant provinces came to pay homage to the returned king, and their eyes inevitably slid to me with expressions ranging from curiosity to absolute contempt. "They say she bewitched him," I heard the Duchess of Norhaven whisper to her daughter as they pretended to admire the hall's stained glass. Perhaps she used the same charm her mother employed to seduce her father. I clenched my fists under the folds of my dress, feeling my nails dig into my palms. Beside me, without looking directly at me, he laid his hand over mine in a gesture almost imperceptible to others, but which sent a current of warmth through my arm. The contact lasted only an instant, but it was enough for me to feel something strange, as if from his veins to mine flowed an ancient energy, a power that made my blood sing in response. That same night, as I watched the moon from my chamber window, I felt a presence behind me. I didn't need to turn to know who it was. His scent, wood, leather, and something more primal like earth after rain, had already become familiar to me. "They'll never accept me," I whispered, not taking my eyes off the moon. "To them, I'll always be the bastard who dared to rise beyond her station." He approached, and this time he didn't hesitate to touch my shoulder. His fingers were warm, almost feverish. "Do you think they accept me?" His voice sounded different that night, more hoarse, closer to that other side he fought so hard to contain. "Do you think I don't see the fear in their eyes, the way their hands tremble when they have to hand me something? They fear me because they know what I am." I turned to face him and almost recoiled at what I saw. His eyes, normally the color of dark amber, now had a golden glow, almost luminous in the dim light of the room. His pupils were contracted into vertical slits, like those of a wild animal. "And what are you?" I asked, my voice almost inaudible. He smiled, and there was something predatory in that smile. "The last of my line, the guardian of a secret this kingdom has tried to forget for centuries." His hand moved from my shoulder to my face, his thumb tracing the contour of my cheek with a delicacy that contrasted with the intensity of his gaze. "And the man who will make you a queen, even if I have to tear this kingdom apart to do it." His proximity made my heart beat so hard I was sure he could hear it. His face drew closer to mine, and for a moment I thought he would kiss me, but he only rested his forehead against mine. His eyes closed, as if the simple contact was both a relief and a torture. "There's something in your blood that responds to mine," he murmured. "I felt it from the first moment you touched me in the ruins. That's why I can't let you go, even knowing the danger I represent." Before I could answer, we heard the sound of hurried footsteps in the corridor. He moved away with such speed I could barely follow, and when the door opened, revealing an anxious maid, he was already a respectable distance away, as if we had merely been conversing formally. "Your Majesty," the maid curtsied deeply, avoiding looking directly at either of us. "Forgive the intrusion, but there's an emergency in the main hall. Countess Rowena, she's—" He raised his hand, silencing her. "I know. I was expecting this." He turned to me and his eyes had returned to normal, though there was still a shadow of something wild in them. "Stay here. Lock the door. Don't open for anyone but me." After he left, I went back to the window. Below, in the courtyard, I saw torches being lit hastily. Horses neighed, restless, as if sensing something humans couldn't perceive. And then I heard it, a distant howl coming from the mountains beyond the castle walls. A sound so distressed and furious that it made the hairs on my neck stand on end. Instinctively, I brought my hand to where he had touched me and felt my skin still warm, pulsing as if it had a life of its own. Something was changing in me, something that went beyond etiquette lessons and fine dresses. Something in my blood responded to a call older than the kingdom itself. That night, I dreamed of dark forests and red moons, of chains breaking and golden eyes watching me from among the trees. And in my dream I ran, not as prey but as an equal, free and wild under the moonlight. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into 2 months of a strange dance between expectations and secrets. The wedding date was announced for the next full moon, and the castle buzzed with preparations. Artisans from all provinces arrived daily, bringing fabrics, jewels, spices, and exotic flowers. My gown was being crafted by 7 seamstresses who worked day and night, their skilled hands creating a garment worthy of the legend already beginning to form around me. "The servant who bewitched the Wolf King," I heard one of the younger maids tell a newcomer, without realizing I was nearby, behind a tapestry in the corridor. "They say that when he first saw her, his eyes shone like gold, and all the candelabras in the hall went out at the same time." It was curious how the stories grew, gaining magical and dark contours with each new whisper. What no one seemed to notice was the truth hidden behind the fantasy, the way my own hands sometimes trembled with a power I didn't understand, the way my dreams became more vivid each night, full of forests and moons and golden eyes that followed me among the trees. He appeared and disappeared like shadows in the moonlight. Sometimes, days passed without us seeing each other, except on formal occasions where we needed to maintain the appearance of a royal couple in formation. Other times he came to my room in the middle of the night, just to stand silently by the window, watching the moon as if it held some vital secret. "What happened that night?" I asked once, referring to the emergency with Countess Rowena. "No one tells me anything, and the servants fall silent when I approach." He remained with his back to me, his silhouette outlined against the night sky beyond the window. His shoulders seemed to tense under the dark fabric of his shirt. "Rowena tried to poison the banquet wine," he finally replied, his voice controlled, but with an undercurrent of fury. "Not for me, for you." I felt my stomach clench with the revelation. Not that it was completely unexpected. I knew there were enemies in the darker corners of the castle, but hearing the confirmation made everything more real, more dangerous. "How did you know?" He turned then, and even in the dim light I could see that golden glow in his eyes, the mark of the creature that dwelled beneath his human skin. "I can smell certain things," he said simply. "Poison is one of them." He took a step toward me and his expression softened a little. "She's in the dungeons now. Her fate will be decided after the wedding." The hesitation in his voice alerted me that there was something more, something he wasn't telling me. "What aren't you saying?" I insisted, rising from the chair where I was sitting. For weeks I felt like everyone is keeping secrets from me, as if I were a child incapable of understanding the truth. His face hardened for an instant, and then, with a sigh that seemed to carry the weight of the world, he approached until he was only a step away. "The truth is that this marriage is not just a political union or a whim of mine," he said, his voice low and intense. "It is an ancient necessity as old as the kingdom itself. My blood. Our lineage carries a burden few would understand." He paused, as if measuring his next words carefully. "You must have already realized that I am not like other men." "The eyes," I whispered. "The way you move, the way everyone seems to fear you without knowing exactly why." He nodded slowly. "Our family, the true heirs of this throne, made a pact centuries ago with forces most mortals prefer to ignore. We received power, longevity, strength, but at a price." He raised his hand to the level of my face, not touching me, but close enough for me to feel the warmth emanating from his skin. "In each generation, we need a queen whose blood can stabilize ours. A woman whose spirit is strong enough to bear the weight of our curse, but gentle enough not to be consumed by it. And you think I am that woman?" I asked, my voice betraying the disbelief I felt. I, who have no noble blood, no refined education? His lips curved into a sad smile. Nobility of blood is the least of concerns for creatures like us. What matters is inner strength, the ability to look into the abyss and not get lost in it. His eyes shone more intensely. When you found me in the ruins, chained and bleeding, anyone else would have fled or killed me. You freed me, even without knowing who or what I was. That requires a rare kind of courage. Something in his words sparked a memory in me, something my mother, before she died, had told me on a particularly cold winter night. Something about our own lineage, about a secret that ran in our blood, passed from mother to daughter. There's something more, isn't there? I asked, feeling a strange certainty grow within me. Something about me, about my own blood. For the first time since I had known him, I saw genuine surprise on his face. How do you... My mother used to say there was more to us than others could see, I explained, feeling the words flow from me as if torn from some deep place in my memories. She said our dreams weren't just dreams, and that we should fear the full moon not out of superstition but out of caution. He looked at me with a new intensity, as if truly seeing me for the first time. His hand finally touched my face, a touch light as a breeze but which sent waves of heat through my entire body. You don't know who you are, he murmured, more to himself than to me, or what you can become. Before I could ask what he meant, we heard footsteps in the corridor again. This time, however, they were not the hurried steps of a servant, but the heavy, deliberate tread of military boots. He moved away quickly, his face assuming a mask of cold indifference that I had already learned to recognize as his public expression. The door opened, revealing General Thorne, a man with hard features and eyes that seemed to constantly calculate the strategic value of everything he saw. Your Majesty? He gave a brief bow, his eyes quickly glancing at me before returning to the king. The reports from the northern border have arrived. We need your immediate attention. He nodded and turned to me one last time. Rest, he ordered, loud enough for the general to hear. Tomorrow we have the ball of presentation to the ambassadors, and you will need your strength. After they left, I remained motionless in the middle of the room, trying to process everything I had just heard. Curses, ancient pacts, blood with power. It all sounded like the horror stories the maids told on winter nights. And yet something within me resonated with those words, as if a dormant part of my being was finally beginning to awaken. I walked to the full-length mirror they had placed in the room, studying my own image as if I could find some answer there. The young woman who looked back at me seemed both familiar and strange, the same features I had always carried, but now framed by silk and jewels, her posture more erect, her gaze more direct, and then for a brief instant, as a ray of moonlight entered through the window and touched my reflection, I had the impression that my own eyes shone with a golden flash. I recoiled in fright, blinking several times. When I looked again, I saw only my normal eyes staring back at me. But the feeling persisted, the sensation that beneath my skin was something more, something that responded to the call of the moon and the touch of the man who would be my husband. That night, when I finally managed to sleep, my dreams were more vivid than ever. I ran under the moonlight through ancient forests, feeling every leaf, every stone, every drop of dew beneath my bare feet. And beside me ran a wolf with fur dark as night, its golden eyes reflecting the stars above. The ball of presentation to the ambassadors arrived with all the pomp expected of a royal event. The grand hall was decorated with banners from the 5 provinces, and enchanted crystals floated near the ceiling, casting a soft, shimmering light upon the guests. Music came from a group of bards positioned in an alcove, their melodies flowing through the air like crystal-clear water. Lady Evelyn personally oversaw my preparation, her critical eye examining every detail of my gown, a night blue silk garment embroidered with silver threads that formed constellations. My hair, always rebellious, had been tamed into an elaborate braid intertwined with tiny pearls. Remember, she instructed as she adjusted the silver diadem on my head, today is not just a party. It's a test. The ambassadors will be evaluating not only the military and economic strength of the kingdom, but also the stability of the royal lineage. Your behavior will directly reflect on their perception of our future." I nodded, feeling the weight of that responsibility add to all the others I already carried. Lady Evelyn, despite her rigidity, had become a constant and almost affectionate presence in my new life. Beneath her severity, one could perceive a fierce loyalty to the kingdom and, surprisingly, to me. "He trusts you," she said suddenly, her voice softer than usual. "More than any of us. That means something." Before I could answer, she moved away, resuming her formal posture. "It's time. The king awaits you in the throne room for the ceremonial entrance." The journey through the corridors was like a hazy dream. Servants bowed at my passing, guards saluted, and I wondered if I would ever get used to it, who for so many years had been invisible to the court's eyes. He waited for me as promised, imposing in his formal black attire with gold and red accents. The iron and ruby crown rested on his head, contrasting with his dark hair. When he saw me, something in his face softened for an instant, a flash of genuine admiration that made my heart quicken. "You are," he began, but stopped, as if words were inadequate. Instead, he offered me his arm. "Shall we?" Our entrance into the grand hall was announced with trumpets and a herald who proclaimed our full titles that still sounded strange to my ears. The entire hall bowed in synchronized reverence, like a human wave bending before us. He led me to the thrones in the center of the hall, and only when we were seated could the guests rise again. The music resumed, more lively now, and couples began to form for the first dance. "Smile," he murmured, leaning slightly toward me. "They are watching." I forced a smile that I hoped looked natural while my eyes scanned the hall, identifying important figures Lady Evelyn had taught me to recognize. The Ambassador of Norhaven, a tall, thin man with a pointed beard. The Duchess of Eastbrook, famed for her political poison hidden beneath sweet smiles. The Commander of the Border Guard, with his face scarred by battle. And then, almost hidden between two ornate pillars, I saw a face that made my blood run cold. My stepmother, Lady Isolde, accompanied by her two daughters. I hadn't seen her since the night of the engagement announcement, when she had fainted from shock. Her gaze met mine across the hall, and the hatred I saw there was so palpable I could almost taste its bitterness on my tongue. "She shouldn't be here," I whispered, not averting my eyes. "I invited her," he replied, his voice calm but with a note of harshness. "Sometimes, it's better to keep your enemies close, where we can observe them." Before I could question him, he rose and extended his hand to me. "The first dance belongs to us," he announced, loud enough for those nearby to hear. I accepted his hand, feeling the familiar warmth that always emanated from his skin. He led me to the center of the hall where a circle opened to give us space. The music changed to a slower, more ceremonial melody, the traditional crown dance, which symbolized the union between the monarch and his consort. "Breathe," he instructed, placing a hand on my waist. "Let your body remember what it learned." In recent weeks, among all other lessons, dancing had been one of the most exhausting. Hours and hours spinning under the critical eye of dance masters until my feet bled inside my practice slippers. Now, with the entire hall watching us, I felt all the training vanish from my mind. But then he began to move, and my body responded as if we had danced together 1,000 times before. There was a natural grace in his movements that contrasted with his intimidating appearance, like water flowing beneath an icy surface. Following his steps was like being carried by an invisible current, and soon I found myself spinning and floating through the hall in perfect synchrony with him. "See?" he murmured as we completed the first sequence to discreet applause. "Your body knows more than your mind believes." There was something in his words that seemed to have a meaning beyond the dance, but before I could ask, the music changed, and other couples joined us in the hall. He continued to guide me, now among dozens of other dancers who formed complex patterns around us. "The Ambassador of Norhaven is particularly interested in you," he commented casually as we executed a spin. Perhaps because Norhaven has its own legends about women with special blood. I quickly glanced in the direction of the ambassador, who was indeed watching us with an unsettling intensity. What does he know? I asked, lowering my voice even further. Probably more than we'd like to admit, he replied, his grip on my waist momentarily tightening. Norhaven is an ancient land, with traditions dating back to a time when magic still flowed freely through the world. They have methods for identifying those who carry certain gifts. The music came to an end, and he led me back to the throne, where we sat to observe the continuation of the ball. Servants passed with trays of wine and exotic delicacies, and I realized that despite the hunger I felt, my stomach was too constricted to accept any food. As the night progressed, several dignitaries approached to pay their respects and, inevitably, to closely assess the future queen. I answered polite questions with the courtesy I had learned, conscious of every inflection of voice, every hand movement, every measured smile. It was exhausting, but I managed to maintain the composure Lady Evelyn had so emphasized. It was almost at the end of the night, when many guests were already showing the effects of wine, that I saw my stepmother approach. She came alone, her dark green dress rustling like dry leaves in the wind. Beside me, I felt him tense almost imperceptibly. Your Majesty, she curtsied elaborately to him, ignoring me completely. What a magnificent night. The kingdom celebrates your return and your surprising choices. The way she pronounced the last word made clear what she thought of those choices. Lady Isolde, he replied, his voice controlled, but with a coldness that made several nearby courtiers discreetly step away. I'm glad you accepted our invitation. I hope you are enjoying the celebrations. Immensely, she smiled, a smile that didn't reach her icy eyes. Finally, she turned to me. My dear stepdaughter, what an extraordinary transformation. Who would have imagined that the little maid who cleaned the fireplaces would now sit on the throne? Every word was like distilled poison, but I kept my face serene, remembering Lady Evelyn's lessons about never showing weakness. Life holds surprises for us, doesn't it, stepmother? I replied, my voice calm, just like the wheel of fortune, which elevates some and brings others low. Her eyes flashed with barely contained fury, and for a moment I thought she would forget all etiquette and attack me right there. Instead, she leaned slightly as if to share a secret. Beware the full moon, dear, she whispered. They say it reveals the true nature of all of us. Before I could reply, he stood up abruptly, his presence suddenly filling all the space around him like a storm about to break. Lady Isolde, his voice was low, but carried an authority that silenced the entire hall. Your daughters seem to need guidance. Perhaps it's time to return to them. It was not a request, but a clear order. She bowed again, more rigidly this time, and retreated without another word. But the damage was already done. Her words had planted a seed of unease in me that grew with every second. The full moon, the same one that would illuminate our wedding in 3 days. He must have noticed my perturbation, for he leaned close to my ear. Don't let her affect you, he murmured. Isolde has always been an expert in manipulation and fear. It is the only weapon she has left. I nodded, but the feeling of apprehension did not leave me for the rest of the night. And when we finally returned to my chambers, I knew sleep would be hard to find. What happens on the full moon? I asked directly as soon as the door closed behind us. He remained silent for a long moment, as if debating internally about how much to reveal. Finally, with a heavy sigh, he walked to the window, his usual refuge. The full moon amplifies what we are, he replied, looking at the sky where an almost full moon already shone. For ordinary people, it's just a brighter night. For those like me, like us, it's when blood speaks louder than reason. He turned to me, and there was a vulnerability in his gaze I had never seen before. That's why the wedding must happen exactly on that night. When our bloods unite under the full moon, the balance will be restored. You will be my anchor in humanity, and I will be your door to a power you have barely begun to comprehend. I approached him, feeling a courage I didn't know I possessed. What if I don't want this power? What if I just want to be normal? His face twisted with something that looked like pain. Normal? He repeated with a bitter laugh. You were never normal even before you met me. You felt different your whole life, didn't you? As if there was something dormant inside you, something others couldn't see or understand. His words struck something deep within me, a truth I had always known but had never consciously formulated. My entire life, even in the most solitary and degrading moments as a servant, there had been a core within me that remained untouched, untamed, a spark that no humiliation had managed to extinguish. "What am I?" I asked, my voice almost a whisper. He raised his hand, hesitating for a moment before touching my face with a gentleness that contrasted with his usual strength. "You are like me," he replied. "A descendant of an ancient lineage, when humans still communed with the wild essence of the world. Your mother must have known, must have protected that secret even at the cost of her own life." I remembered then how my mother had died, from a sudden and violent fever that consumed her in 3 days, right after the winter solstice when I was only 12 years old. Before she passed, she had given me a red stone amulet, making me promise never to take it off. The same amulet I had lost years later when my stepmother tore it from my neck during a fit of rage. "The amulet," I murmured, understanding hitting me like lightning. "It contained my power?" He nodded slowly. "It didn't contain. It controlled. It suppressed. It was a protection, so you could pass unnoticed until you were ready." I felt my body tremble with the revelation, and my legs weakened. He supported me, leading me to a chair near the fireplace. His arms were strong, secure, and for the first time since I had known him, I felt he wasn't fighting the urge to touch me. It was as if the truth once revealed had freed something between us. "What will happen on the full moon?" I insisted, needing to know what awaited me. He knelt before me, his eyes now completely golden, gleaming in the firelight. "If we do not marry, if the ritual is not completed, your blood will awaken without control. The transformation will be chaotic, painful." He paused, as if carefully choosing his next words. "Some women of your lineage went mad when that happened. Others became something that not even the oldest texts can adequately describe." "And if we marry?" I asked, trying to control the tremor in my voice. "Then I will be your anchor, just as you will be mine. My blood will guide yours through the transformation. You will keep your mind, your essence, while embracing your true power." His fingers intertwined with mine, and I felt that strange current of energy flow between us again. We will be a perfect balance, neither completely human nor completely beast. Sovereigns not only of a kingdom, but of our own natures. The magnitude of what he described was almost impossible to absorb. My whole life had been a lie, or perhaps a half-truth. I was not just a mistreated servant, an unimportant bastard. I was something more, something that transcended the small human cruelties I had endured for so long. "Does my stepmother know?" I asked suddenly. "Is that why she hates me so much?" A shadow crossed his face. "Isolde comes from a lineage of hunters, families who for centuries have dedicated themselves to identifying and eliminating those like us. Your mother probably recognized her for what she was when your father brought her home as his new wife. It was a fatal mistake." My heart clenched with an old and new pain at the same time. My mother had not died of fever, she had been murdered, and I, a helpless child, had been entrusted to the care of her killer. "Why didn't she kill me too?" I asked, my voice thick with emotion. "The amulet," he explained. "While you wore it, your blood slept. You seemed completely human in her eyes. And later, perhaps it was more satisfying for her to break your spirit than your body." I stood up abruptly, walking to the window he had left open. Outside, the almost full moon poured its silver light over the castle gardens, making the fountains and statues appear to be made of liquid mercury. And beyond the walls, the dark forests stretched to the horizon, calling me with an appeal I had never fully understood until that moment. "So that's why you chose me," I finally said, without turning around. "Not for me, but for what my blood represents." I heard his footsteps approach slowly until he was right behind me. He didn't touch me, but I could feel the warmth of his body, the contained power that emanated from him like invisible waves. "In the beginning, yes," he admitted, his voice low and intense. "When I awoke in the ruins and smelled your scent, I knew immediately what you were, even if you didn't know it yourself. It was like finding water in the desert." He paused, and when he continued, there was a vulnerability in his voice that made me turn to face him. But then you freed me without hesitation. You looked into my eyes without fear, even when any sensible person would have fled. And every day since then." His hand rose to my face, hovering millimeters from my skin without actually touching it. "Every day makes me question whether it was fate or something deeper that united us." There was a raw sincerity in his words that made my heart race. This man, this creature that was both human and something more, had entered my life like a storm, tearing me from everything I knew and casting me into a world of secrets and dangers. And yet, looking into his golden eyes, I felt a connection that transcended rational explanations. "Do I have a choice?" I finally asked, the question that had tormented me since the engagement announcement. His expression became solemn, almost sad. "Everyone has choices," he replied. "But we rarely have the luxury of choices without consequences. If you refuse, I will not force you. But when the full moon comes, your blood will awaken anyway. And without my guidance, I'll become a monster," I finished for him. "You will become pure savagery," he corrected. "Neither monster nor human, just primordial power without direction." I closed my eyes, trying to process everything I had discovered. Part of me wanted to flee, to deny all of it, to cling to the simple known identity I had always had. But another part, the part that had always dreamed of forests and moons, the part that had never felt completely at ease among ordinary humans, that part resonated with his words like a perfectly struck bell. When I opened my eyes again, I made my decision. "Then teach me," I asked, raising my chin in a gesture of determination. "If I only have 3 days until the wedding, I want to know everything I can about what I am, about what we will be together." Something ignited in his gaze, admiration, relief, perhaps even pride. "Tomorrow," he promised. "Tomorrow we will begin your true training. No more etiquette and politics, but the awakening of your blood." He extended his hand, and this time I didn't hesitate to touch it. As our fingers intertwined, I felt that current of energy flow between us with more force than ever, as if our very souls recognized each other through our skin. "Until tomorrow, then," I whispered. He brought my hand to his lips, in a gesture that seemed both a promise and a seal. "Until tomorrow, my queen." After he left, I remained by the window for a long time, watching the moon that would soon be full. In 3 nights, my life would change forever, not just by the wedding or the crown, but by the awakening of something primordial in my own blood. And strangely, despite the fear and uncertainty, a calm resolve settled in my heart. My whole life had been a preparation for this moment, even without my knowing it. The humiliations, the losses, the small cruelties, everything had forged a strength in me that would now be needed. I looked at the moon one last time before turning away from the window. "I'm ready," I whispered to the night, like a promise to myself. For the first time since I had arrived at the castle, I slept a deep, dreamless sleep, as if my body knew it would need all its strength for the days to come. The next morning, I was awakened before dawn by Lady Evelyn, whose normally austere face showed an unusual tension. "Dress," she ordered, placing on my bed not one of the usual elaborate gowns, but a simple linen tunic and soft leather trousers, sturdy boots, hair tied back. "No jewels." I looked at her with confusion. "Where are we going?" "We're not going anywhere," she replied, emphasizing the plural. "You are going with the king, just the 2 of you." She hesitated, something rare in her decisive personality. "He is different this morning, more like the old accounts describe him." I immediately understood what she meant. As the full moon approached, his wild side grew stronger, harder to contain beneath the mask of civility. I dressed quickly, refusing the help of the maids who usually assisted me. If today was the day I would begin to understand my true nature, I wanted to do it on my own terms, without intermediaries. Lady Evelyn led me through corridors I had never traversed, down stairs that seemed to plunge into the very foundations of the castle. The air grew progressively colder and damper, smelling of earth and ancient stone. Finally, we reached a dark wooden door, reinforced with iron. "He awaits you on the other side," Lady Evelyn said. Then, in a surprising gesture, she briefly touched my shoulder. "Courage," she murmured, before stepping away. I took a deep breath and pushed open the heavy door. What I found on the other side was not a room or a dungeon, as I expected, but a natural passage carved into the rock, illuminated by torches fixed to the walls at irregular intervals. I followed the tunnel for several minutes, feeling the air gradually change, becoming cooler, smelling of vegetation and damp earth. Finally, the passage ended in a circular opening that led to a forest clearing. The sun had just risen, and its first rays filtered through the trees, creating golden patterns on the ground covered with leaves and moss. He stood in the center of the clearing, his back to me. He wore simple clothes similar to mine, but there was something different in his posture, a wild fluidity, as if the restrictions of royalty and civilization had been temporarily abandoned. When he turned, I almost took a step back. His eyes were completely golden now, with no trace of the human iris, and there was an intensity in his gaze that was both terrifying and hypnotic. "You came," he said, his voice hoarser than usual with a slight rumble that resembled a distant growl. "I promised I would," I replied, keeping my voice steady despite the nervousness I felt. He smiled, and there was something predatory in that smile, teeth slightly sharper than they should be, a wild pleasure that was more animal than human. "Today," he announced, "you begin to know your true self, no longer as human, no longer as servant or queen, but as what you truly are. A daughter of ancient blood, an heir of the moon." He extended his hand, and when I took it, I felt that familiar energy flow between us, more intense than ever. His skin was feverish, pulsing with contained energy, and I could feel a slight tremor in his fingers, the cost of the control he still maintained. "What should I do?" I asked. "First forget," he replied. "Forget the rules, the fears, the limitations the human world imposed on you. Your body knows truths your mind has forgotten." He led me deeper into the forest, moving with a silent grace that I tried to imitate, without much success at first. Each time a twig snapped under my feet, he paused, patiently waiting for me to find my own rhythm. Gradually, something began to change. It was as if the forest was speaking to me in a language I had forgotten, but which slowly returned. I began to feel the air differently, not just as something I breathed, but as a living fabric laden with information. Smells, sounds, the texture of the wind against my skin, everything seemed more vivid, more significant. "Yes," he murmured, observing the change in me. "You are beginning to remember." After what seemed like hours of walking, we reached another type of clearing, this one surrounded by ancient stones arranged in a circle, covered in moss and engraved with symbols that seemed to vibrate under my gaze. In the center there was a small natural spring, crystal clear water bubbling from a crack in the rock and collecting in a stone basin. "This place is ancient," he explained, his voice reverent. "Older than the kingdom, older than the names we use. Here, the veil between worlds is thin, and blood speaks loudest." He approached the spring and knelt. With a fluid movement, he drew a dagger from his waist, an ancient blade with carvings that matched the symbols on the stones. Without hesitation, he cut his own palm and let drops of his blood fall into the crystal-clear water. "Come," he called, extending the dagger to me. I approached slowly, feeling a mixture of fear and fascination. There was something primitive and sacred about that moment, something that transcended the formal ceremonies of the castle or the religious rituals I knew. I took the dagger in my hands, surprisingly heavy for its size. The blade gleamed in the sunlight as if eager for my blood. With a quick movement, I cut my palm, feeling only a slight sting as dark red blood welled from the wound. "Join your blood to mine," he instructed, his golden eyes fixed on mine. I extended my hand over the spring, letting my blood mix with his in the crystal-clear water. When the first drop touched the surface, something extraordinary happened. The water began to glow with a bluish light, pulsing as if it had a life of its own. And with that pulsing, I felt something awaken within me, something ancient and wild that had been dormant my entire life. My vision suddenly changed, colors becoming more intense, shadows revealing details that had previously gone unnoticed. Distant sounds of the forest, the flapping of a bird's wings, the rustle of a rodent among dry leaves, reached my ears with startling clarity. And the smells. Gods, the smells! It was as if the whole world was a tapestry of aromas that I could read like an open book. "What's happening to me?" I asked, my voice sounding strange to my own ears. "Your blood is awakening," he replied, and I could hear the satisfaction in his voice. "The full ritual will happen on the full moon, but this..." He gestured to the glowing spring. "This is just a taste of what's to come." I looked at my hands and almost cried out in surprise. My nails had lengthened slightly, becoming stronger, more like claws. And when I touched my face, I felt my canines slightly more prominent against my tongue. "Don't be afraid," he approached, taking my hands in his. "It's only temporary. A glimpse of what you can become. Your body is still learning, adapting." I took a deep breath, trying to calm the panic that threatened to overwhelm me. "Is this how you feel all the time?" He smiled, a sad and understanding smile. "Yes and no. I've learned to control it, to maintain a balance. But yes, this world of sensations, this clarity, it's always present for me." I looked around, seeing the forest with new eyes. It was as if a veil had been lifted, revealing a more vibrant, more alive reality. And with that perception came a strange feeling, a longing to run, to feel the wind, to delve deeper into the forest. "You want to run," he observed. Not as a question, but as a statement. "Your blood wants to test its new limits." I nodded, unable to deny the impulse growing within me. "Then run," he said simply, stepping aside. "The forest is yours for today. I will follow you." I hesitated for only a moment and then let instinct guide me. My feet found a natural rhythm on the forest floor, moving with an agility I had never possessed before. Each step felt lighter than the last, each breath deeper and more satisfying. Soon I was running as I had never run, leaping over fallen logs, dodging low branches by pure instinct. I could feel him behind me, matching my pace effortlessly, giving me space to explore this new freedom. I don't know how long we ran. Time seemed to have lost its conventional meaning. The sun moved across the sky, occasionally visible through the canopy, but I was lost in a state that was part ecstasy, part discovery. My body had become a perfectly tuned instrument, responding to the subtlest commands with precision and strength. Finally, we reached a stream where I stopped, breathless but not exhausted as I should have been after such a run. He stopped beside me, and for the first time since I had known him, I saw on his face a genuine, uncomplicated joy, the joy of a being in perfect harmony with its nature. "You are magnificent," he said, and there was sincere admiration in his voice. "Your blood awakens faster and with more strength than I expected." I bent down to drink from the stream, and seeing my reflection in the water, I almost didn't recognize myself. My eyes had golden flashes similar to his, and there was something wild and untamed in my expression that I had never seen before. "Is this truly what I am?" I asked, both to him and to myself. "It's part of what you are," he replied, kneeling beside me. "Neither completely this nor completely what you were before. We are beings of two worlds, walking on the border between civilization and savagery." He looked at the sky, where the sun was beginning its descent toward the horizon. "We need to return. The court must already be wondering about our absence, and there are final preparations for the wedding." I felt a pang in my heart at the mention of returning. The forest, with its wild simplicity, now seemed more like home than the castle ever had. "Don't worry," he said, reading my thoughts in my expression. "This isn't our last visit here. As sovereigns, we will have the freedom to attend to the needs of both sides of our nature." He stood and extended his hand. "Shall we?" I took his hand and rose, but instead of letting go, I kept our fingers intertwined. "One last thing," I asked. "Your name. Your true name, not the title everyone uses." A flash of surprise crossed his face, followed by something softer, more vulnerable. "Lowell," he finally replied. "My name is Lowell." "Lowell," I repeated, feeling the name on my tongue as if it were an enchantment. "I am Lyra." It was the first time I had told him my name, I realized. Until then, I had just been the girl, the servant, the future queen. As if my previous identity didn't matter. But in that moment, I offered him the only thing that truly belonged to me. "Lyra," he said, and the way he pronounced my name sent a shiver down my spine. It was as if by saying it, he made it more real, more powerful. A fitting name for one born under the constellation of the wolf. I raised my eyebrows, surprised. "How do you know when I was born?" He smiled, a smile that combined mystery and ancient knowledge. "There is much about you that I know, Lyra, and much more that we will discover together." With that, we began our journey back to the castle, moving in harmony through the forest that now seemed both an ally and a refuge. And as we walked, a certainty grew within me. No matter what the future brought, I would never be the same. The next 2 days passed in a whirlwind of activity. Final preparations for the wedding consumed every moment, every corner of the castle. Artisans, musicians, cooks and servants rushed back and forth, all under the watchful eye of Lady Evelyn, whose perfectionism seemed to have reached new heights. My wedding gown, a creation of white and silver silk with night blue details that resembled constellations, was finally ready. When I tried it on for the last time, the seamstresses sighed in admiration, and even Lady Evelyn allowed herself a rare smile of approval. "It looks like it was made for you," said one of the older seamstresses, adjusting a sleeve, as if the moon itself had woven the silk. If only she knew how close her words came to the truth. But beneath all the bustle of preparations, there was an undercurrent of growing tension. I could feel it in the air, in the nervous glances the servants exchanged when they thought I wasn't watching, in the way the guards had doubled their vigilance in the corridors. Lowell. It was still strange to think of him by name, after so long calling him only King or Your Majesty, was increasingly distant, more tense. In the rare moments we met, his eyes were completely golden now, and there was a contained energy in his movements, like a storm about to break. "It's getting harder to maintain control," he admitted the night before the wedding. When he came to my chambers after everyone had retired, the moon, it cools stronger with each passing hour. I watched him pace restlessly around the room, his steps silent despite his evident agitation. There was something profoundly feline in his movements now, a predatory grace that was both fascinating and alarming. "What will happen tomorrow night?" I asked, needing to know what awaited me. "During the ceremony?" He stopped his pacing, turning to me with an expression that was both solemn and intense. "The ritual is ancient," he explained. "Older than any religion practiced in the kingdom today. It will be performed in the grand temple, under the circular opening in the ceiling that will allow the light of the full moon to bathe us directly." He paused, as if carefully choosing his next words. "There will be 2 parts, a public one, which will appear to be a traditional wedding ceremony for the court and guests. And then," his eyes shone more intensely, "then, when the moon reaches its zenith, the true union will take place. Our bloods will intertwine under the direct light of the moon, and the pact will be sealed." A shiver ran down my spine, not entirely from fear, but from a strange anticipation. Since the experience in the forest, my senses had remained sharper, though not as intense as that day. And with this new perception came a growing awareness of the moon, of its position in the sky, of its influence on my body and spirit. "Will there be pain?" I asked, as direct as I had always been with him. His expression softened a little. "Yes," he admitted. "I cannot lie about that, but it won't be ordinary pain, Lyra. It will be the pain of transformation, of awakening. Your body and spirit will expand beyond the limits you've known your entire life." He approached, stopping just a step away. The heat emanating from him was almost palpable, like being near a furnace. "But I promise you this, I will be by your side every moment. My blood will guide yours through the change, and what emerges—" His eyes swept over my face with an intensity that made my heart race. "What emerges will be something this world hasn't seen in centuries." I took a deep breath, absorbing his words. So much was at stake, not just my future or his, but seemingly the future of the entire kingdom. And yet amidst all this grandeur, there was something deeply personal, intimate, in the connection we felt. "I am ready," I stated, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. He smiled then, a smile that transformed his severe face into something almost luminous. Slowly, As if still fearing to cross some invisible boundary, he reached out to touch my face. His fingers traced the curve of my cheek with a delicacy that contrasted with the brute force I knew he possessed. "From the moment you freed me, I knew you were different," he murmured. "Stronger than you appeared, wilder than the world allowed you to be. And tomorrow," his eyes shone with a promise, "tomorrow the world will see what I have always seen." I inclined my face toward his touch, closing my eyes for a moment to absorb the sensation of his skin against mine. When I opened them again, I saw that he had drawn even closer, his face now inches from mine. There was a moment of perfect suspension, like the instant before lightning strikes the ground, all the world's energy concentrated in a single point. And then, as if responding to some inaudible call, we both moved simultaneously. His lips found mine in a kiss that was neither hesitant nor exploratory. It was recognition, claim, a promise sealed in warmth and desire. His hands slid to my waist, pulling me against him with a controlled force that still made my knees weaken. My own fingers intertwined in his hair, feeling its surprisingly soft texture between my fingers. The kiss deepened, becoming something wilder, more primitive. I felt my canines lengthen slightly in response to the intensity of the moment, and when I nipped his lower lip, he emitted a low sound that was half grunt, half growl, a sound that should have frightened me, but which only intensified the heat spreading through my body. It was he who finally pulled away, though his arms still held me firmly. His breath was ragged, and his eyes had become almost completely golden, with only a thin ring of their original color around his dilated pupils. "Tomorrow," he said, his voice hoarse and restrained. "Everything tomorrow under the full moon." I nodded, understanding both what he said and what he didn't say. There were rituals to be followed, ancient protocols that could not be ignored. What we began in that room could only be completed under the direct light of the moon, when we were both ready for the complete transformation. He stepped away completely then, his movements regaining some of the control he had momentarily lost. At the door, he turned one last time, his eyes meeting mine with an intensity that transcended words. "Until tomorrow, my queen," he simply said, and then left, leaving me alone with thoughts and sensations that fizzed like the strongest wine. I walked to the window, looking at the almost full moon that hung in the sky like a promise. Tomorrow that silver disk would be complete, perfect, pouring its ancient light upon us during the ritual that would change our lives forever. "Until tomorrow," I whispered to the night, a promise both to him and to myself. The wedding day dawned with a surprisingly clear sky for that time of year. When the maids opened the curtains of my chambers, the sunlight streamed in a golden flow that seemed like an omen of good fortune. "A perfect day for a royal wedding," commented the youngest of the maids, a genuine smile lighting her face as she prepared my morning bath. If only she knew that it wasn't the sun that mattered today, but the moon that would come at night. The day passed in a blur of activities. A bath with perfumed oils, nails trimmed and polished, hair washed and dried under the attentive care of specialists brought from distant provinces. Every inch of my body was prepared, perfumed, adorned, a temple being consecrated for an ancient ritual. Lady Evelyn supervised everything with her usual efficiency, but there was a tension in her eyes that didn't match the festive atmosphere. When the maids momentarily withdrew to fetch something, I approached her. "You know, don't you?" I asked in a low voice, "about what will truly happen tonight?" She looked at me for a long time before answering, her eyes evaluating me as if measuring my strength. "Yes," she finally replied. "My family has served the royal lineage for generations. We are guardians of certain knowledge." She paused, her expression softening slightly. "You are more prepared than you imagine, Lyra. There is a strength in you that I saw from the first day, even when you still carried trays and lowered your eyes." Her words surprised me, not only by the rare use of my name, but by the almost maternal tone she had never used with me before. "I am afraid," I admitted, feeling I could be honest with her in that moment. She nodded, a brief shake of her head that acknowledged my fear without judging it. "Fear is wise when we face profound transformations. But remember, your blood carries memories older than your mind. trust it tonight." We had no chance to talk more, for the maids returned with trays of light food, fruits, soft cheeses, fresh bread. "You must eat," Lady Evelyn insisted, "but in moderation. The ritual will require a delicate balance between body and spirit." The hours passed quickly, and soon it was time to put on my wedding gown. The dress was even more stunning than I remembered. The white and silver silk seemed to capture and reflect light in an almost supernatural way. And the night blue details that formed constellations seemed to subtly change depending on the viewing angle. The embroidered stars were not chosen at random, Lady Evelyn explained as she supervised the maids who helped me dress. "They are the constellations that will be visible tonight during the ritual. Your gown is a map of the sky that will witness your transformation." A crown of silver and crystals was placed upon my partially unbound hair. "Not common silver," Lady Evelyn said, adjusting it carefully. "Moon silver forged during an eclipse and bathed in dew collected on the solstice night. It will help channel the moonlight directly into your blood." When the preparations were finished, all the maids withdrew except one, who held a large mirror so I could see myself completely. The reflected image barely seemed like myself. The woman in the mirror radiated an ethereal, almost supernatural beauty. The dress perfectly embraced my body, the crown shone with its own light among my hair, and there was a gleam in my eyes that seemed to come from within. "It is time," Lady Evelyn announced, and there was a respect in her voice I had never heard before. "The procession awaits you." As I left my chambers, I found a group of noble maidens who would serve as my attendants during the procession to the Grand Temple. They carried white and silver flowers, and their dark blue dresses complemented mine without competing with it. The journey through the castle corridors was like a dream. Servants and courtiers bowed at my passing, eyes wide with admiration or astonishment. Soft music accompanied us, played by invisible musicians positioned in niches along the way. When we reached the central courtyard, I saw that a crowd had gathered to witness the procession. Common citizens from the village, merchants, artisans, all had received special permission to enter the castle on this day, forming a human corridor that led to the gates of the Grand Temple. I took a deep breath and began the walk. With each step, I felt the weight of the moment, the gravity of what was about to happen. It was not just a wedding, it was an ancestral ritual, the rebirth of a lineage the world had forgotten. The Grand Temple was the oldest structure in the castle, built with stones so ancient that no one knew exactly when they had been placed. Its architecture differed from the rest of the castle, more organic, less angular, with columns that twisted like petrified tree trunks and stained glass windows that told stories of times before books. The enormous oak doors were open, revealing the interior illuminated by hundreds of candles. The main hall, circular like the full moon, was already filled with guests, the nobility of the kingdom, ambassadors from distant lands, priests and sages, and there, in the center, beneath the circular opening in the ceiling that awaited the moon, he stood, Lowell. His ceremonial attire was as impressive as mine, black as the darkest night, with gold and blood-red details that seemed to pulse with a life of their own. The crown on his head was not the usual state crown, but something older, more primitive, a circle of dark metal with points that resembled flames or, seen from a certain angle, fangs. Our gazes met across the hall, and I felt that immediate connection, that current of energy that always flowed between us. Even from a distance, I could see that his eyes were completely golden now, shining like liquid amber in the candlelight. The music changed, becoming more solemn, and I began my walk down the central aisle. With each step, I felt the anticipation grow in the air, not just the normal anticipation of a royal wedding, but something deeper, more primitive. It was as if the temple itself was holding its breath, awaiting the moment we would unite under the moonlight. When I finally reached the center and stopped before him, the world around us seemed to disappear. There was only us, enveloped in a bubble of perfect silence despite the music and the murmurs of the crowd. "You are magnificent," he whispered, low enough for only me to hear. There was genuine admiration in his voice, but also something more, a contained hunger. An almost painful anticipation. The high priest, An elderly man in white and gold robes stepped forward to begin the ceremony. His words were the traditional ones of a royal wedding. Oaths of loyalty to the kingdom, promises of alliance between lineages, blessings from the official gods. But beneath those conventional words I perceived a subtext, carefully chosen phrases that would have a different meaning for those who knew the true nature of the ritual. Union of blood and spirit, under the light of the Celestial Mother. May the ancestral strength flow through both. Formulas that seemed religious to the uninitiated, but which spoke directly of the primordial pact we were about to renew. The public part of the ceremony seemed to stretch indefinitely, though a part of me knew it was being accelerated to coincide with the moon's arrival at its zenith. We exchanged rings, not simple gold bands, but intricate circles of dark metal similar to his crown, engraved with symbols I recognized from the stones in the forest. Finally, the high priest announced that it was time for the lunar blessing, a ritual that, he explained to the guests, was traditional for royal weddings, requiring a moment of private contemplation for the couple under the direct light of the moon. The guests were gently directed to the adjacent hall where the banquet awaited. Only the high priest, Lady Evelyn, and 4 trusted guards remained in the temple with us, sealing the doors as soon as the last guest left. "The moon is almost in the right spot," the priest announced, his voice changing completely, no longer the ceremonial and pompous tone, but something more direct, more ancient. "We need to prepare." He and Lady Evelyn began to reposition the ritual furniture, revealing in the center of the hall a circle engraved in the very stone floor. A circle filled with symbols and runes that seemed to vibrate as the moonlight began to stream in through the opening in the ceiling. Lowell approached me, taking my hands in his. His skin was feverish, pulsing with contained energy, and I could feel a slight tremor in his fingers, the cost of the control he still maintained. "There is still time," he said, his voice hoarse and intense. "If you wish to withdraw, if the fear is too great." I looked into his golden eyes and saw what it cost him to offer this last escape. The ritual was necessary for him as much as for me, perhaps more. Without the stability my blood would provide, his own nature would eventually consume him, transforming him completely into the beast he fought to emerge. "I choose this," I replied firmly. "I choose you, I choose us, I choose what we can be together." Something relaxed in his expression. Not completely, but enough for me to know that my words had reached that part of him that still doubted, that still feared losing me. "It is time," the priest announced, indicating the circle that was now bathed in the light of the full moon streaming in through the opening in the ceiling. Lowell led me to the center of the circle, where 2 ancient stone goblets waited on a small altar. Beside the goblets, the same dagger I had used in the forest rested, on a dark red cloth. "The ritual is simple in its form," the priest explained, "but profound in its meaning. Your bloods will mix in the goblets, and then, under the direct light of the full moon, you will drink from each other. The pact will be sealed, the balance restored." Lowell took the dagger and, without hesitation, cut his palm, letting the dark blood fill the first goblet halfway. When he offered me the dagger, I noticed his hand trembled more visibly now, as if each second of control was a battle. I took the dagger and, following his example, cut my own palm. The pain was sharp, but brief, almost purifying in its simplicity. I let my blood flow into the second goblet, surprised by its unusually dark color, almost with a bluish glow under the moonlight. The priest took both goblets and, murmuring words in an ancient tongue that I didn't understand, but which seemed to resonate with something deep in my blood, mixed their contents, pouring half into each goblet again. "Under the light of the mother moon," he chanted, "now in our tongue, drink each other's blood, and may the ancient pact be renewed. May balance be restored, strength contained by wisdom, savagery tempered by compassion." Lowell took his goblet, and I took mine. Our eyes met one last time, human eyes bidding farewell, knowing that what would awaken after the ritual would be something more, something different. "Together," he whispered. We brought the goblets to our lips simultaneously. The taste of blood was metallic, ancient, with a complexity no words could adequately describe. I drank every last drop, feeling the liquid descend my throat like liquid fire. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, like a wave breaking against rocks, the transformation began. It was as if every cell of my body exploded and recomposed at the same time. The pain was indescribable, not a common localized pain, but something that pierced every nerve, every muscle, every bone. I fell to my knees, vaguely aware that Lowell had also fallen, his body contorting in similar agony. The moonlight seemed to intensify, becoming almost tangible, no longer just illumination, but a physical force pressing against my skin, infiltrating through my pores, merging with the blood we had shared. My vision wavered, alternating between a supernatural clarity and a confused haze. In one moment, I could see every detail of the runes on the floor, the texture of the priest's robes, the drops of sweat on Lady Evelyn's forehead. In the next moment, everything dissolved into nebulous forms and intense colours. And then came the visions. Flashes of ancient forests, of red moons, of ancestors running under starry skies, faces of women who looked like me, carrying the same blood through generations. Rituals similar to this one, performed in stone circles, in deep caves, in moonlit clearings. I felt my bones rearranging, my muscles strengthening, my senses expanding beyond any human limit. My skin seemed to be on fire, every pore opening to absorb the moonlight that continued to pour over us. Through the agony of the transformation, I felt Lowell's presence not just physically, but on a deeper level, as if our minds were intertwining just as our bloods had. I could feel his own pain, his struggle, but also his fierce determination, his indomitable will that served as an anchor for both of us. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, the pain ceased. I found myself on my knees, breathless, my body trembling with the echoes of the transformation. My wedding gown was torn in several places. The silver crown had fallen, and when I raised my hands, I saw that my nails had transformed into sharp, elegant, yet lethal claws. Slowly, I looked up at Lowell. He was already standing, his own attire in a similar condition to mine, but it was his face that held my attention. His features were still recognizable, but there was a different quality now. A perfect fusion of man and beast that was both terrifying and majestic. His eyes, completely golden, met mine, and in that gaze was recognition, admiration, and something deeper, a bond that transcended words or gestures. He extended his hand to me, and when I took it, I felt a current of energy flow between us, different from anything I had felt before. It was not just the physical attraction or the emotional connection we had shared, it was something primordial. A bond forged in the very blood and sealed by the moon. He helped me up, and when I finally stood, I realized my own body had changed. I was stronger, more agile, every muscle perfectly tuned. And my senses, gods, my senses! The world was a symphony of smells, sounds, and colors I had never perceived before. "It is complete," the priest announced, his voice carrying a mixture of reverence and relief. "The pact has been renewed. The balance restored." Lady Evelyn approached, carrying new cloaks to cover our damaged attire. "The guests await," she reminded us. "We need to return to the banquet before suspicions begin." Lowell nodded, but his eyes never left mine. "Are you well?" he asked, his voice deeper and more resonant than before. I took a quick internal inventory, feeling the changes that had occurred. The power pulsating in my veins was frightening in its intensity, but it was not chaotic or uncontrolled as I feared. It was as if there was an ancient wisdom guiding it, channeling it. The same wisdom I saw in the eyes of all those ancestors during the visions. "I am," I replied, surprised by the certainty in my own voice. "It's incredible." A slow smile spread across his face, revealing slightly more pronounced canines. "And this is just the beginning," he promised. "There is much more to discover, to explore together." I adjusted the cloak around the remnants of my dress, while Lady Evelyn worked quickly to rearrange my hair and replace the crown. In minutes we were presentable again, not perfect as before the ritual, but sufficiently composed not to arouse immediate suspicion. The temple doors were reopened, and we were led into the grand banquet hall where hundreds of guests awaited. Music erupted in celebration at our entrance, and goblets were raised in a toast to the new royal couple. As we walked among the tables, greeting guests and receiving felicitations, I realized how different everything seemed now. I could smell the subtle fear in some courtiers, the bitter envy in others, the intense curiosity in foreign ambassadors. I could hear whispered conversations from dozens of feet away, distinguish every instrument in the orchestra, feel the vibration of the strings in the very air. But more impressive than all of this was the bond I felt with Lowell. Even when we separated to greet different guests, there was a constant awareness of him, as if an invisible thread connected us, allowing me to feel his emotions, his physical state, his exact location in the hall. When we finally sat at the head table for the formal banquet, he leaned in to whisper in my ear, "You are doing admirably well for someone who has just been reborn." There was genuine pride in his voice, and something more, an intimacy that made my heart race and my blood warm. The bond between us pulsed with this new emotion, and I saw his eyes gleam in response as if he had felt the echo of my own feelings. "When can we leave here?" I asked, maintaining a polite smile for the guests while speaking low enough for only him to hear. "I feel like I will explode if I am confined for much longer." He smiled, a smile that combined understanding and promise. "Protocol requires us to remain until midnight," he replied. "But after the forest awaits us." The promise implicit in his words sent a shiver of anticipation down my spine. The idea of running under the full moon, of testing the limits of this new body, of exploring the bond that now united us. All of it made my blood sing in my veins. The banquet proceeded with its elaborate pomp. Exotic dishes were served, rare wines were poured, grand speeches were made. I maintained the role of newly crowned queen with all the grace I could muster, while internally counting the minutes until our liberation. It was almost midnight when I noticed a subtle commotion near one of the side entrances. My sharpened senses picked up a familiar scent, bitter as gall, cold as ice. My stepmother, Lady Isolde, had returned to the hall after a notable absence during much of the banquet. There was something different about her, a dark purpose, a chilling determination that put all my newly awakened instincts on alert. Through the bond, I felt that Lowell had also perceived her presence, his attention discreetly turning to her while he continued a conversation with the ambassador beside him. "Something is wrong," I whispered, leaning in as if it were merely an amorous confidence. I didn't need to finish the sentence. Lowell nodded almost imperceptibly, his hand finding mine under the table. "Not here," he murmured. "Too many innocents. Let her approach." And she approached, gliding among the guests with the poisonous grace of a serpent. Her eyes never left mine as she advanced, and there was in them a hatred so pure, so concentrated, that I could almost feel it as a physical force. When she reached the head table, she performed a perfectly executed curtsy, a cold smile on her lips. "Your Majesties," she greeted, her voice honey over blades. "What an extraordinary union. They say the full moon brings revelations, don't they?" There was a veiled threat in her words, and I felt the bond with Lowell pulse with alarm. He stood slowly, his posture casual to observers, but laden with predatory tension that only I could fully perceive. "Lady Isolde," he replied, his voice controlled. "How kind of you to rejoin us. I feared you were indisposed." She smiled more broadly, a smile that did not reach her icy eyes. "On the contrary, Your Majesty, I have never felt more prepared." Her hand moved then, a swift gesture that would have gone unnoticed by ordinary human eyes. But our new senses caught everything in crystalline detail. The small vial she withdrew from the folds of her dress, the silvery liquid that shone unnaturally in the candlelight, the murderous determination in her eyes. Before any guard could react, before Lowell could even move, something awakened within me, a protective instinct so fierce, so primordial that I barely recognized it as my own. My body moved of its own accord with a speed and precision that would have been impossible just hours before. In a blink, I was before her, my hand gripping her wrist with enough force to make her bones creak. The vial fell, but my other hand caught it in the air before it could shatter on the floor. Not today, stepmother, I said, my voice deeper, more resonant than it had ever been. Not on our day. Her eyes widened with genuine shock and fear at what I had become. For in that moment, I knew my eyes were golden like Lowell's, that my canines had lengthened in response to the threat, that my entire body radiated the newly awakened power that coursed through my veins. Abomination, she hissed, her fear quickly transforming into renewed hatred. I knew there was something impure in your blood, but this... You have become a complete monster, like him. Lowell was by my side now, his presence a palpable force. The guards approached, and the nearest guests recoiled, creating an empty space around our small drama. The vial, he said, extending his hand for me to give him the object. When I placed it in his palm, he examined it briefly before passing it to the priest, who had approached discreetly. Liquid silver, the old man confirmed after a quick inspection, extracted under the waning moon and consecrated with hunter rituals. Deadly poison for those of your blood, your majesty. Lowell nodded, his face a mask of controlled calm, though through the bond, I could feel his simmering fury. Guards, he called, his voice echoing through the now silent hall. Escort Lady Isolde to the dungeons. She will answer for attempted regicide in court tomorrow. As the guards led her away, she kept her gaze fixed on me, no longer with burning hatred, but with something worse. A cold, calculating promise. This doesn't end here, she said low enough for only ears like ours to catch. There are others like me, hunters who will not rest while abominations like you walk among humans. Then she was dragged out, and the hall erupted in shocked murmurs and frantic speculation. Lowell turned to the guests, raising his hands in a reassuring gesture. Friends, he announced, his voice carrying that natural authority he had always possessed, but now amplified by the power of the ritual. A regrettable incident, but already under control. Lady Isolde clearly suffers from mental disturbances, perhaps exacerbated by the full moon. She will receive the fair trial our laws guarantee. He turned to me then, taking my hands in his in full view of everyone. But we will not allow the bitterness of a single person to tarnish this night of celebration and union. His eyes met mine, and through the bond I felt his concern, his relief for my safety, and something more. Admiration for the swiftness with which I had reacted, for the strength I had demonstrated. Time advances, he continued, addressing the guests again, and tradition requires that we now retire to the privacy of our chambers. The banquet will continue, the wine will flow, and we hope everyone enjoys the celebrations until dawn. There was polite applause, toasts raised, and then, finally, we were free to leave. Lady Evelyn discreetly led us through a side exit, away from curious glances and inevitable questions. The royal chambers have been prepared, she informed us when we were alone in a dark corridor, but I suspect they are not your immediate destination. There was a glimmer of understanding in her eyes, and for the first time since I had known her, I saw the ghost of a genuine smile on her lips. The forest passage is clear, she added. The guards have orders not to question your nocturnal excursions. Lowell nodded, grateful for her discretion and efficiency. Thank you, Evelyn. As always, your loyalty is invaluable. She gave a brief curtsy before withdrawing, leaving us finally alone. The moment her footsteps distanced enough, Lowell turned to me, all pretense of restraint abandoned. His eyes glowed like molten gold, and there was an almost electric energy emanating from him. You were incredible, he said, his voice low and intense. Faster than I, stronger than any newly transformed should be. I felt a warmth spread across my face with his compliment, a curious mixture of pride and shyness that seemed almost comical considering the power that now coursed through my veins. It was instinct, I explained, as if my body knew what to do before my mind even processed the threat. He smiled, a smile that combined understanding and promise. Your blood remembered what your mind never knew. He extended his hand to me. Shall we? The forest calls and the night is ours. I took his hand without hesitation. In that moment there was no doubt, no fear, only the absolute certainty that this was my path, that this man was my companion, and that the life opening before us would be different from anything I had imagined. We followed the secret passage I had traversed days before, emerging into the clearing where our journey of discovery had begun. The night was perfect, clear sky, shining stars and the full moon at its zenith, pouring its silver light over the forest like a blessing. Lowell stopped at the edge of the clearing, turning to me with an expression of wild joy I had never seen on his face before. "Ready to run, my queen?" In response, I felt my body transform even further, responding to the moon's call and the bond that united us. It was not a complete transformation like in the ancient legends. We did not become fully beasts. It was something subtler, more balanced. Eyes that shone like liquid gold, senses sharpened beyond human comprehension, supernatural strength and agility, the ability to understand the language of the forest and its creatures. "Always," I replied, feeling the same wild joy grow within me. And then we ran, side by side under the full moon that had sealed our destiny. We ran like creatures born of the forest itself, our feet barely touching the ground, our bodies moving in perfect harmony with the natural world around us. Through the bond, we shared every sensation, every discovery, every moment of pure freedom. As we ran, I finally understood what Lowell had said before the ritual. We weren't monsters, nor were we entirely human. We were the balance between worlds, the bridge between civilization and wild nature. And in that balance, there was a strength and a wisdom that the world had forgotten long ago. My stepmother's words, her threat about other hunters, hovered like a distant shadow in the back of my mind. I knew there would be challenges ahead, dangers that even our new power could not completely eliminate. But that night, under the light of the full moon, with the man who was now part of my own blood running by my side, I chose not to fear the future. I chose to embrace what we were, what we could be together. I chose the freedom I had found in the ruins where it all began. I had freed a cursed king, and he, in return, had freed the wild queen who had always slept within me. And as we ran under the stars, our spirits as free as the wind that caressed the forest, I knew with absolute certainty that no matter what came next, we had found our true home, in each other and in the ancient magic that ran in our veins.